Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought that I would talk about this little video and this little topic, this little subject that I thought was very particularly interesting. And this is going to be another conversation about Mr. Saul Canelo Alvarez, who I still do believe is one of the best pound for pound fighters in the world of boxing today. In my view, Canelo Alvarez is not only one of today's best and greatest fighters. I believe that Canelo is probably one of the greatest fighters, in my view, that I have personally ever seen. However, where Canelo Alvarez's next decisions and his career trajectory goes next, it is going to determine how great he is going to be remembered as. Right now, I have Canelo Alvarez within my top 30 fighters of all time, and a lot of people would heavily disagree with me putting him there. But listen, you cannot defeat the fighters that he has defeated, just such as a Gennady Golovkin, an Arsenio Lara, a Danny Jacobs, a Caleb Plant, a Billy Joe Saunders, a Callum Smith, even a Sergey Kovalev when, he was a little bit more wore down, but still a champion. Austin Trout, Miguel Cotto. You cannot defeat all those fighters, and in my view, not be an all-time great boxer. Canelo Alvarez is truly an all-time great boxer, but of course, the chase that he made for history in his last fight against that of Mr. Dimitri Bivol, he did overall take a step backwards. And the reason why that is because Canelo Alvarez, of course, ended up losing that fight. And in my view, he ended up losing that fight about 8 rounds to 4. And of course, certain channels that I tend to review, like that of Dante's Boxing Nation or that overall, a Boxing Ego or Aki TV, they'll tell you that the fight overall was even further apart than that. I don't think I can agree with that. I think that Canelo at least clearly won a good 4 rounds in that fight. But I think the biggest issue for Canelo Alvarez in that fight was that his stamina was just so out of proportion. I thought that, in my view, that he gained a little bit too much muscle mass. Maybe he thought overall that he could bully Dimitri Bivol around a little bit more than what he once originally thought, or that maybe he could scare him and pound him into submission early, and that Dimitri Bivol would not be willing to risk it to get the biscuit, but Dimitri Bivol proved him wrong. This fight almost kind of reminds me of the Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz first match that ended up happening several years ago. And a certain amount of people may say, well, why would you compare it to that? In my opinion, this is almost a more extreme version of that. Because this is a fight to where if Canelo Alvarez does get into a rematch with Dimitri Bivol, I could see him pulling off the victory because I do think there is certain adjustments, especially physically, that Canelo Alvarez could do. I do not think that his stamina was great at all in this fight, but it is going to be a very, very difficult proposition for that at Canelo Alvarez. There are just certain fights to where you can tell to where the fighter, I do not think overall did their 100% best as what they could have. Now, is that me saying that I believe that Canelo Alvarez will 100% defeat Dimitri Bivol in a rematch? No, I do not. Because Dimitri Bivol is an A grade fighter. He is an A level fighter. He is a very good all around fighter. He is a person that has a very good Olympic pedigree and professional pedigree, amateur pedigree as well. So Dimitri Bivol not only is he going to be someone who is heavily experienced and now has that great A grade win over Canelo, and he knows that he can beat him. But on top of that, he's an A grade skilled fighter. This is not going to be an easy competition for that of Canelo Alvarez. I do believe that Canelo, all around at his best, is the better fighter than that of Dimitri Bivol. But Dimitri Bivol did completely outperform Canelo in that first fight. And we're going to be talking about in this video by that of Boxing Ego, is Canelo Alvarez making excuses for that overall of losing to Dimitri Bivol? And what I will say about Canelo Alvarez is this: if he is going to win this fight, just like I told Deontay Wilder, just like I said overall about either Jamel Charlo or Brian Castano heading into their rematch, or just like saying overall with any other fighters that have recently lost, you are never going to improve. You are never going to get in a better position if the reason overall why you say that you lost is that you just make excuses. Sometimes you need to man up. Yes, overall can be a hard pill to swallow. But at the end of the day, Canelo Alvarez, if he needs to defeat Dimitri Bivol, or if he is to defeat Dimitri Bivol, he is overall going to have to fess up that he was not overall his best self in my view, and that in my view that he is going to have to make certain adaptations. And some people may think that I'm making an excuse for Canelo, saying, "What do you mean that he wasn't at his 100% best?" Listen, it's very obvious that Canelo Alvarez's stamina was not up to par. He pretty much was dead tired after 5 rounds. it is what it is. Now, who knows? Maybe light heavyweight. Maybe it's just not destined for Canelo Alvarez against Dimitri Bivol or to be to be. But I believe that Canelo Alvarez, he will have a better chance in the rematch if he overall does realize that he does not only need to make some physical adjustments, he's going to have to make some tactical adjustments as well. So, anyways, Mr. Boxing Ego, who, of course, as we all know, is a very, very big fan of Canelo Alvarez, and I say that, of course, with very, very serious sarcasm. He's going to be talking about Mr. Canelo Alvarez and the Dimitri Bivol rematch, at least the potential of it. We're going to tune in. Let's see what happens.
Canelo alludes and hints to him being injured as a possible excuse why he lost to Dimitri Bivol. Uh-oh. Stay tuned. What up, Fight World? It's your boy Ego, and I'm back with some more boxing. Payday, you want payday? I know that. Canelo Alvarez says, quote, I lost because I lost, not because of golfing or nothing. I was golfing 3 years ago and I won the undisputed super middleweight championship. So that's not the reason I lost to Bivol. It's another reason there, but I don't want to say anything and make any excuses. I lost and that's it. I got tired and that's it.
People are coming out with this narrative that the reason why Canelo Alvarez lost to Dimitri Bivol is because allegedly he wasn't 100% focused on boxing, and because all in all, apparently he's going into golf and all this other shit. Please, it is what it is. That is not the reason why Canelo Alvarez lost. Now, if he was someone that looked to be in and out of the sport or have one foot out of the sport, maybe like that of a Mikey Garcia, then maybe I would be a little bit concerned. But golf and other passions that Canelo Alvarez has, that is not the reason why he lost to Dimitri Bivol. In my view, the reason why Canelo Alvarez lost to Dimitri Bivol was because of his hubris. And Dimitri Bivol just might be a little bit too much for Canelo Alvarez. Who the hell knows? I believe that he could potentially beat that of Dimitri Bivol in a rematch, but at the end of the day, Dimitri Bivol now has the confidence booster of getting that first win. Dimitri Bivol has always been an A-grade fighter, at least if not even an A-plus fighter for that other light heavyweight division. And on top of that, when it comes down to it, he's a very intelligent fighter. And Canelo, we'll see how he recovers from this, because it is not easy to head into a fight, especially against an opponent that is decently bigger than you, like what Dimitri Bivol is over Canelo Alvarez. And overall, to lose a fight, in my opinion, 8 rounds before the way that he did, and head into a rematch and just beat that fighter. A lot of the times, it does not end up happening that way. Even some of the all-time great fighters do not end up winning certain rematches like that. So it's going to be very interesting to see where Canelo Alvarez goes and what adjustments he tries to make, because he is going to have to make adjustments. No doubt about it.
I couldn't train like usually, but it is what it is. I lost, but I'm going to get my chance again. I'm not eating a vegan diet or anything like that. It's other things. It's not that I overtrained. It is other things. I don't want to say anything. End quote. I tweeted this because I thought it was funny. LOL, Canelo saying I lost because I lost. LOL. One, saying you don't want to make any excuses, but alluding to something being wrong in camp is an excuse. And more on that later. So
I would somewhat agree with Mr. Boxing Ego here. But once again, you can tell that, with his channel, that he has a very clear bias and he treats certain fighters with different energies. He is not a person, Boxing Ego always says, oh, I like to give my flowers to everybody. No, you like to give your flowers overall to the fighters that have the complexion for your protection. Because when Deontay Wilder made 1,000,002 excuses to this day, as Deontay Wilder would say, till this day, when it comes down to it, he still overall would say that those are viable excuses. Boxing Ego still to this day will not say that what Deontay Wilder said was false, even though it pretty much was. Not even pretty much was. It 100% was. The excuses Deontay Wilder was coming out with, they were probably the worst excuses I've ever heard a boxer or a professional athlete make.
Make sure you stay tuned to the end of this video, so I'll break that down. So saying you don't want to make any excuses, but then alluding to something being wrong in camp, that's an excuse. Just because you didn't say the reason, you're insinuating that, quote, something occurred that prevented you from winning the Bivol fight. LOL. Number two, I thought Canelo told the whole world that he beat Bivol. So why is he now saying he lost? Previously, he said Bevo only won 4 to 5 rounds. Canelo never came out and corrected that. So which one is it? So many.
I have to agree with Mr. Boxing Ego there. And what that tells me is that Canelo Alvarez, he knows overall that he lost that fight. I think all in all that he said after the fight that he believes that he won. That's a little bit understandable because these fighters, they get very emotional after a loss. You know, they get very competitive. It is what it is. But at the end of the day, I don't want to hear any excuses. And if Canelo Alvarez is somewhat alleging that there was a possible injury, I didn't hear anything about it before the fight. I don't want to hear anything about it after. And I said the same thing with Vasily Lomachenko. I said the same thing with Manny Pacquiao. I said the same thing with a certain amount of other boxers as well. So it has to be the same energy with Canelo Alvarez. But Canelo hopefully will be intelligent enough to realize, at least for his sake, that he is going to have to make adjustments. And one thing I will say about Canelo is this: he does somewhat seem to be, at least in a good place, to where he knows that he is going to have to train a little bit differently. He cannot swell up as much as what he was in that first fight. Otherwise, he's going to be completely dead tired. I don't think I've ever seen Canelo Alvarez that dead tired in a fight. I don't even know if he was that dead tired in the Mayweather fight. I've seen Canelo Alvarez have more energy probably in the Floyd Mayweather Jr. fight than what I've seen him have in the Dimitri Bivol fight. Because after those first 4 rounds, he was completely done.
Questions. Now, I think this is a bad look for Canelo Alvarez. For one, if all these things are the truth, and whatever, let's say it sounds like an injury, like you're saying you were sick or you were injured, something to this level, right? So if that is in fact the case, then why aren't you rematching Dimitri Bivol? You're no longer sick, and he said he's healthy.
Well, Canelo overall has already stated that he will rematch Dimitri Bivol, I believe, after the Gennady Golovkin fight. And I'm going to have to see how Canelo Alvarez looks in that Gennady Golovkin fight. Because, once again, with certain fighters, especially fighters on the plateau and on the level of a Canelo, which in my view is on the all-time great level, when certain all-time great athletes do lose, especially at the peak of their career, sometimes that's it for them. So we'll see overall what ends up happening. It should be very, very interesting. I do believe that more than likely he'll beat Gennady Golovkin, but I'm going to need to see a very impressive performance out of Canelo Alvarez. I'm going to need to see a little bit of a retribution. So we'll see what happens.
Now, in the same interview for the Golovkin fight, so why are you fighting a 40-year-old Golovkin who has seen better?
But I actually believe that the Golovkin trilogy or rematch, the trilogy, I believe that it actually is the best option for Canelo right now. Not only do I think that it's going to do okay numbers, because of course it's going to be looked at as a trilogy. Of course, Gennady Golovkin, in my view, is not the same fighter what he used to be. But Canelo, I do think, needs to take at least one fight off from the light heavyweight division. To be honest, I would even advise him to take a couple of fights off from the light heavyweight division, but I understand him overall going in and wanting to avenge that loss. I understand. But the Gennady Golovkin first fight, I think, to be honest with you, that probably is the best option. And if he looks severely dominant in that fight, if he even stops Gennady Golovkin, then I would say, okay, you know what? Let's give this Dimitri Bivol rematch a chance. But we'll see what happens.
Days instead of fighting the guy. Instead, Canelo's saying in the interviews that he'll fight Bivol at 175 at some time. Yeah, but what happens if Bivol doesn't get a fight and he's inactive, right? And meanwhile you're.
Well, then that's Dimitri Bivol's problem. It is what it is. Here's Boxing Ego once again making any excuse to not give Canelo Alvarez credit, as he always does when it comes down to it, as he always does, because he does not like Canelo Alvarez. But if it comes to a fighter like Gervonta Tank Davis, who he truly likes, who has a complexion for his protection, all of a sudden, he's okay with any fight. So come on, man. So what are you really about? Once again, I get these certain people on my channel that watch the Ego or the DBN channel or the Aki TV channels, and they're like, "Oh, you're just hating on these channels." I'm not that type of person. I don't hate on anybody. I don't hate on any type of channel. I'm not the jealous type of person. I think that is a waste of energy, and I think that is a pathetic trait. I am not a person overall who gets jealous. I'm not a person that hates on any of these channels. But when I tell these people that it's very obvious that these channels have a racial issue, it just is what it is. There's no hating, there's no jealousy about it. And I'm not the only one overall to state this, because if you clearly are intelligent enough, you can see what they're truly about. It's just like sometimes with the ESPN narratives or the Fox Sports News narratives. If you're intelligent enough overall, to see certain machinations behind certain narratives, then overall you're going to call them out. And I'm sorry, but Mr. Boxing Ego, the majority of the time with his narratives, especially about Canelo, and let's be real, other fighters that are not black American fighters, there's usually something rotten in Denmark. Let's also be real. This is the same person that still alleges to this day that he believes that Deontay Wilder was cheated by Tyson Fury in 17 different ways. Pretty much went along with all the excuses that Deontay Wilder made. Does that sound like the most reasonably logical person to you? So it is what it is. You tell me. Tell me if I'm missing something here.
And Golovkin probably going to stop him. And Bivol, still, we haven't heard any updates what his next fight is. This is what boxing does, boxing politics. They could purposely not give Bivol a fight. So when he comes back and let's say if Canelo fought him in May of 2023, Bivol ain't been in the ring since May of 2022. These are the games. It's very easy.
Well, then that'll be Dimitri Bivol's problem. Dimitri Bivol, there's no rematch clause. So if Dimitri Bivol does that, then guess what? That'll be Dimitri Bivol's issue. Okay? It is what it is. Brian Gastano and Jamel Charlo. Now, I would not blame this on Jamel Charlo, of course, but they, neither of them had fought in the ring, I believe, for a certain amount of time. Do you not give Jamel Charlo 100% credit because Brian Gastano apparently had a bicep injury and he was out for several months? Like, just stop the bullshit.
See, so many questions from Canelo making this statement. Again, if Canelo said post-fight that he believes he won the fight, now he's saying he lost. So which one is it? Because somebody point me in the direction of a Canelo Alvarez interview where he came back and corrected what he had previously put out. How is this acceptable for people in boxing to watch the fight, watch the post-fight interview? Canelo's claiming he won. So let's say he went back and watched the fight and then he sees that he lost the fight. So now that you're promoting the Golovkin fight and the conversation of Bivol is coming on and coming up, why won't you correct your previous statement if you now feel that you lost? Like an actual, hey, okay, I rewatched it and he got the best of me. That's why.
Well, one could argue that that is Canelo's way of recorrecting himself. But Mr. Ego, let's not talk about overall certain people judging fighters for making excuses, at least from your mouth. I don't want to hear it, because when Deontay Wilder or certain black fighters made excuses that you tend to like, you were right there with them and you were supporting their excuses. So don't sit here and act like you're above everybody else, because you're not. All right, I heard you make excuses for Deontay Wilder day after day after day after day. So let's cut the bullshit. All right? Once again, you are basically casting stones in the glass house. You were the pot calling the kettle black. All right? You are a hypocrite. It just is what it is.
It's not advisable to emotionally speak right after a fight or whatever the situation where you still have the emotions and everything.
Well, I would agree, but let's not talk. Once again, I don't really want to hear that coming from your mouth, because you really overall don't know what being logical and objective truly means. Once again, it's normal for a lot of these fighters after the fight to say that they believe overall that they got robbed or whatever. And listen, it is what it is. But the thing is about Canelo Alvarez is he in the best point, and is he being truthful and honest with himself overall to the point to where he is going to have a chance in the Dimitri Bivol rematch? Because if he is not truthful and honest with himself, he's not going to win the rematch. But right now, at least with Canelo Alvarez, it does seem like he is somewhat in a realistic position. So that should be good for Canelo Alvarez. But even with that, Dimitri Bivol is going to be a very, very difficult target to beat. But we'll see what happens.
It's running high because you tend to say stuff that it's better if you think about your thoughts, collect yourself, watch the tape, etc. You could end up saying something you regret. And that's what it sounds like for Canelo Alvarez. He said that Bivol only won 4 or 5 rounds. Now he's seemingly, I lost because I lost. And he's seemingly coming to grips with the fact that he really...
Well, let me state this about Canelo Alvarez. It's good that he knows that he lost. It's good overall that he has that mindset, because Canelo Alvarez, he did not win that fight, not even really that close. Once again, I thought he put up a competitive run within the first half of the fight, but pretty much every round after round four, maybe there was one ladder round that you could have gave to Canelo Alvarez, but not that many. He pretty much was getting teed off on because his stamina was so abysmal. But we'll see. Like I said, we'll see what happens later on down the line. But Canelo not only is going to have a different training regimen, or at least lose some of that muscle mass that he gained for the light heavyweight division in that fight, but he's also going to have to change some things tactically.
Lost and admitting that he was tired. And why was he tired? And now he's saying he's not going to do a vegan diet. But all this sounds like excuses because why did you do a vegan if you've only fought one fight at 175 against Sergey Kovalev and that fight was Canelo didn't look great up until the stoppage in that particular fight in my take. I think Kovalev was keeping him at bay with his power and his size and his jab. And he didn't even look like he was trying. And Canelo was
Yes, Sergey Kovalev allegedly was not trying in that fight when it came down to it. He apparently overall threw the fight, which is another bullshit narrative that Boxing Ego overall has went on because they don't like Canelo Alvarez. Boxing Ego has also been another person to allege that he believes that the Sergey Kovalev fight was fixed. Once again, when I tell people overall that these guys seem to have a personal issue with certain fighters, it's nothing to get bitchy. It's nothing to get over emotional about. It's just the facts. I know what I'm talking about when it comes to these people. I can read people usually very damn well, and there's no offense against Boxing Ego, but all he is another bitch ass over emotional fanboy overall, just like he was with Deontay Wilder, and he don't like Canelo Alvarez because he doesn't want him up there high in the pound for pound list. All right, just is what it is. Anyway.
having difficulty getting on the inside. So if you only had one foray into the light heavyweight division and it wasn't your most sensational night for 10 rounds, then why would you switch up something and try a brand new diet, which could change the complexity of your body, or how your body processes energy? You never know. It's just like that's a weird change, and it's like Canelo seems to have meat and no meat and all these diet switches.
I certainly do understand Mr. Boxing Eagle's point, but what I will say is this: I'm not sure about necessarily a vegan diet, but maybe Canelo Alvarez, overall, just like I have said, has finally realized that maybe overall the diet or whatever he did in training was not the best way to go about it. So overall, maybe he just took a wrong turn. Because Canelo, once again, he's gonna have to lose some of that muscle mass. He's gonna have to make sure that his stamina is in tip-top shape. Because I believe that if his stamina would have been in tip-top shape, he probably would have won the fight. I think the main reason overall why he ended up losing, of course, you have to give credit to Dimitri Bivol because he was able to nullify some of the things that Canelo Alvarez sometimes usually does very, very well. But a big part of the reason why I say the main reason why he lost was because of stamina is because I thought Canelo Alvarez was winning pretty much the first 4 rounds of the fight, for at least three of the first 4 rounds. But then after round four, he started backing up and breathing heavy out of his mouth instantly. And when I seen that, I said, well, some overall appears to be something wrong with Canelo Alvarez's gas tank. And if he does not have a second win, he's not going to win the fight.
When he failed a drug test with clenbuterol, he blamed the steak. And then after people were saying he's a drug cheat, then he said he's not eating meat for the Golovkin rematch. And then
And who knows? Could it also be that Canelo Alvarez, that maybe he was not on the same juice that maybe he could have been for some of the other fights? It could be. Who knows? Like I said, I'm a believer that a lot of these fighters are on steroids anyway, so the steroids to me are only a small deal. But a lot of people, of course, they'll say that, oh, PEDs, they don't really do that much for your skill set. Well, your skill set, of course, is pretty much based on how intelligent the fighter is. But sometimes you not only need intelligence, you also need a physicality as well. And that's overall where the PEDs come in. Like I remember when John Jones was caught on, on PEDs, I believe about 17 damn different times in that of the UFC, mainly against Daniel Cormier. And people, even certain UFC fighters, would say that, well, John Jones didn't beat him with steroids, he beat him with skills, which probably tells you that a lot of them UFC fighters are on steroids anyway. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, no, PEDs can be a difference because at the end of the day, they can make you faster, they can make you stronger, they can make your stamina better. They can make you a better overall athlete. So yes, PEDs do have to be factored in. But the thing is that so many of these damn athletes are on PEDs these days. Really, no matter what sport that you look at, especially in the sport of boxing and combat sports, to where I really don't know which I really don't know which athletes are on steroids and which ones aren't. But anyway,
You went back to meat, and then you lose to Bevo, and you say you were vegan for that fight. So it's just all over the place. Furthermore, Barstool Sports, they got a guy, that reporter, that went to Canelo's gym in Bevo camp, and he's like 6'4", and then Canelo allegedly made him pee blood by punching him in the stomach. So what could you be alluding to? See, the boxing really tries to insult your intelligence. Canelo's trying to make it look like
yes, and you also try to insult people's intelligence because you're not that intelligent. But anyway,
something was wrong with him, be it he was sick or he was injured. So how did that 6'4", a guy who would be considered a heavyweight, barstool sport? I get it, he's not a pro boxer, but if you're injured or sick, then how are you punching him in the stomach and allegedly making him pee blood, and then they're reporting about it? And there is
well, that's your point, Mr. Ego. Your point overall is that apparently a reporter who's not even a professional boxer. I really don't think overall that this idiot realizes overall what he just said. Professional boxers are on a whole nother level of conditioning, stamina, and overall toughness when it comes down to when it comes to their athleticism and overall when it comes to what they're used to. And you're comparing overall a reporter overall getting punched in the stomach and him apparently allegedly peeing blood. Like it's really not even within the same universe. But Ego really don't understand that. I understand the point that he was trying to make, but it was a very poor. It was a very poor point. Listen, at the end of the day, what I will say is this: uh, I did not hear anything about Canelo Alvarez allegedly having an injury before the fight. So once again, I don't want to hear anything about it afterwards. I think that Canelo Alvarez made some errors in his training. I think all in all that he gained too much muscle mass, and I think overall that he is going to have to mainly pressure Dimitri Bivol in the rematch. Use his jab more than what he did in the first fight. I think that if he would have had more stamina, he would have been able to use his jab like he usually does in his regular fights, but he was not able to in that one because the stamina was so poor. So the main thing Canelo's going to have to work on is his stamina. And he is also going to have to make some tactical changes. He also may have to use his feet a little bit more to move in and out of that fight. But his stamina is going to have to be in tip-top shape because if it is not in tip-top shape, he is not going to win the rematch.
it's all on videotape, and he was laughing, so it didn't look like nothing was wrong with Canelo. But then you lose, and then all of a sudden, out the woodwork, we got to hear about this. And what Canelo did is the same thing as what we call dry snitching. Let me explain. There's two types of snitching. There's outright snitching, Takashi. That's an outright, you snitched on somebody. Everybody knows your name's on documents. There's paperwork behind it. That's just regular snitching. Everyone's familiar. But then you have dry snitching. What dry snitching is you're basically giving up the same information, but in a more sleuthy, sly way. Like if the cops were like, "Oh, we're looking for the shooter," and you're like, "I don't know, but you might want to check building 4. Like you might want to check apartment da 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 da." That's dry snitching, where you didn't actually say Johnny did it, but you're basically alluding to it. That's what Canelo did. He's saying, I don't.
I would somewhat agree with that. It's kind of the same thing what Deontay Wilder did after he got his ass whooped in that rematch against Tyson Fury, where Deontay Wilder stated, "Oh well, yeah, he was just a better man tonight, but something was up with my legs. I wasn't the same fighter. I had a lot going on." And a lot of fighters tend to do that or whatever. Listen, once again, ain't no one trying to hear that shit. You had a loss. It's very hard to take, and I understand. I'm a competitor myself in certain things. So of course, certain competitors, they tend to make excuses when they end up taking a loss. We've all made excuses here and there, but after a while, you gotta face, you gotta fess up to reality. You gotta face up to reality. And thankfully for Canelo, at least at the current moment in time, it does look like maybe he knows some of the adjustments that maybe he'll need to make. But we'll see what happens.
Want to make excuses for my Bevo loss, but the fact that you're alluding to there being this some mysterious forces or somewhat something or whatever this thing is that you keep saying you don't want to say, in essence, that's making an excuse because now people are going to speculate because you've told them that and then fill in the blanks. So, in essence, you are making an excuse. And that's not a good look for someone who was considered by some to be number one pound for pound in the face of boxing because you lose, you lose. You win some, you lose.
Well, right now, Canelo cannot be the number one pound for pound. Is he still the face of boxing? Yes, he is because of his pay-per-view numbers. You really can't deny that. And Boxing Ego is still pissed off about that because he always tries to deny that Canelo is the face of boxing. It's really nothing to get over emotional about. You're either the face of boxing or you're not. Just like LeBron James and Stephen Curry for the NBA, they're pretty much the faces of the NBA. It just is what it is. If you go to tennis, Novak Djokovic and Rafael Nadal right now are pretty much the faces of tennis. It just is what it is. It's nothing to get over emotional about. Yes, Canelo Alvarez is the face of boxing, but if he continues to suffer losses, he isn't going to be, or at least not as on the high level as what he used to be. So we'll see what happens once again.
Get it back in blood, get it back by a rematch in Bevo. But saying I don't want to make excuses, but then really making an excuse by.
Well, Ego, let's also be real. The reason why you want to see Canelo Alvarez rematch overall Dimitri Bivol so bad is because you really want to see Dimitri Bivol pound Canelo Alvarez into an early grave. That's what you really want to see him do. That's the reason overall why you want to see that rematch instantaneously. And I don't think that it's a good idea for Canelo to take the rematch instantaneously. I think overall he needs to step back, snap himself back into reality, maybe realize that, his eyes were a little bit too big for his stomach when it came down there for that fight, meaning that he took on a little bit more than what he could chew. And then he realizes the adjustments that he needs to make, gain that confidence back. And that's the same thing that I said that Deontay Wilder should have done with Tyson Fury as well. Because heading into that rematch immediately with Tyson Fury, I did not think was going to be a good idea. But because Deontay Wilder, because he's such a damn idiot, not only that, but because he also goes along with basically the Pro Black Fighters League, and basically, is with those people, and because he listened to his dumbass fan base, overall he pretty much walked right into a much superior fighter against Tyson Fury in a time to where I don't think that he really should have took it, because the best chance for Deontay Wilder, in my view, to ever possibly defeat Tyson Fury would have been after a couple of tune-up fights, would have been overall, after maybe a couple of good contenders, maybe even after a couple of years, and then rematch Tyson Fury. And I understand Tyson Fury said that he may retire soon, so I understand why Deontay Wilder wanted to do it instantly. But now there's pretty much never going to be another chance at another Tyson Fury fight, at least from what I see, because you're not going to beat him. And unfortunately for Deontay Wilder, he can now never be remembered as the best heavyweight of his generation, which he never was to begin with, but he would have had a chance, more of a chance anyway, had he overall taken a couple of contenders or had a few fights before another Tyson Fury fight. And that's why I think Canelo is doing the right strategy by facing someone before he faces out of a Dimitri Bivol to get somewhat of his mojo back. But anyway.
Suggesting something was amiss, that's not good, because even if it's the case, even if you stubbed your toe, broke your toe, or something, it doesn't change anything. You went into combat, you signed, you passed all your medicals, and you thought you could beat the man. And then you were throwing hard. It's just like, what? This is just coming for high-profile fights when fighters.
Well, I agree with you, Mr. Boxing Ego. But once again, I hear this energy for Canelo Alvarez. I better hear the same damn energy for the fighters on the know that you usually protect. Because I did not hear the same energy with Deontay Wilder. Every fucking time that I seen this goddamn channel or reviewed a video, every single time that it was a Deontay Wilder conversation, what did he say? Oh, I don't think Deontay Wilder was the same fighter. I think he had a bad night at the office. And if you're intelligent enough, you can tell when a fighter just got their ass whooped because they were not as good of a fighter as the other one. And you can tell when the fighter was off. When Deontay Wilder ended up getting his ass whooped against Tyson Fury was just a much more superior man. When Sergey Kovalev lost to Andre Ward was just a superior man. When overall, like I'm trying to think of another example, when Jamel Charlo ended up, winning over Brian Castano, even though I don't think Brian Castano put on as good of a fight as what he probably should have, you could tell that Jamel Charlo was just a superior man. When Anthony Joshua, for example, lost to Andrew Ruiz, that's a fight to where I said, you know what, there can be some adjustments made there. I don't think Anthony Joshua put on the best type of performance. When Conor McGregor lost to Nate Diaz, I said that, that was not a type of A-grade performance by Conor. There's more things, in my opinion, that he could do. Now, when Conor got his ass whooped against Habib and mollywopped against Habib, that was a fight to where there was nothing that Conor was ever going to be able to do in order to beat Habib Nurmagomedov, because Habib is just on a much higher level than even what Conor is or was. In this fight, I do believe that Canelo can make some adjustments, but it's going to be very, very tough.
Don't want to lose is becoming all too convenient. Manny Pacquiao did it when he lost to Floyd Mayweather. Oh, my shoulder. Lomachenko did it when he lost to Teofimo Lopez and didn't throw punches for 6 rounds.
I agree, and Deontay Wilder did it against Tyson Fury, but I bet you money he's not going to mention him.
Teofimo did it when he lost to Cambosos. Teofimo said that, oh no, my shoulder was bad and my esophagus blew up and, I couldn't breathe. And then George Cambosos missed weight and said, oh.
And notice overall, once again, just like I said, he does not bring up Deontay Wilder. But anyway.
Make them think it. Oh, the art of war. So it's just becoming too convenient when people lose. Let me just give a reason and suggest why I lost and things like that. So even Canelo suggesting this is the same thing as making an outright excuse, because you're giving people some inkling of hope that something else caused you to not perform at your best or beat Bevo. The end. Subscribe to the channel.
But anyways, that's really overall about it for this. But what I will say is this: I don't want to hear any excuses from Canelo, but perhaps this is Canelo's way of saying that he overall did not put on the best strategy. At least Canelo Alvarez realizes that if he is going to defeat Dimitri Bivol, he's going to have to overall train in a different type of way. Now, is he somewhat dry snitching like what Ego said? Is he still not facing up to reality? We'll have to see. Once again, this next fight against Gennady Golovkin, even though Golovkin is not necessarily the same fighter that he used to be, he still right now holds 2 belts within the middleweight division. So Gennady can give him a tough fight if Canelo Alvarez is not the same fighter that he was within his past few fights before this fight against Dimitri Bivol. So that's what I'm saying. This next fight is going to reveal a lot, in my opinion, about where Canelo Alvarez is both physically and mentally, especially mentally. So it's going to be very interesting. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later, and we will see what happens with Mr. Soul Canelo Alvarez. And I'll see you all later.